Captain Lee Daeho stood at the bridge viewport of the diplomatic vessel Seoul's Pride, watching the massive space station grow larger as they approached. Kepler 4482b station hung in the darkness between two stars, its metal corridors and docking bays gleaming under the artificial lights. This neutral ground would host the most important meeting in human history. "Captain, we're receiving docking instructions from Station Control," reported Lieutenant Choi Min-soo from the communications console. His voice carried a slight tremor that he tried to hide. Daeho nodded without taking his eyes off the station. "Follow their guidance, Lieutenant. We don't want any mistakes today." Behind him, Ambassador Park Ji-woo reviewed her notes one final time. She had spent 3 years preparing for this moment, learning everything humanity knew about the Velkaran Empire. The tall woman with graying hair had negotiated treaties with dozens of human colonies. But this was different. This time, humanity's future hung in the balance. "Nervous?" asked Dr. Yoon Hae-jin, settling into the chair beside her. The young xenobiologist carried a tablet filled with research about Velkaran physiology. "Excited," Ji-woo replied. "We're about to meet the most powerful predator species in this sector. They've dominated space for over 2,000 years. Hae-jin scrolled through images of Velkarans on her tablet. The creatures stood 3 meters tall, with thick gray scales covering muscled bodies. Their heads were elongated like ancient Earth, crocodiles, filled with rows of sharp teeth. Claws extended from their hands and feet designed for tearing prey apart. They evolved on a death world, Hae-jin explained to anyone listening. Gravity 3 times stronger than Earth. Predators everywhere. Only the strongest survived long enough to develop intelligence. And now they rule 12 star systems, added Communications Officer Kim Tae-hyun. Their military has never lost a war. The ship shuddered slightly as it entered the station's docking bay. Through the speakers came the voice of Station Control. "Human vessel Seoul's Pride, you are cleared for docking at Bay 7. Velkaran delegation has already arrived at Bay 3. Daeho turned to his crew. "Remember, we represent all of humanity today. The Velkarans agreed to this meeting because they're curious about us. They want to know how soft mammals like humans manage to spread across space without superior strength." In the ship's kitchen, Chef Kim Bo-ram was busy preparing meals for the week-long diplomatic talks. She had studied both human and Velkaran dietary needs for months. The challenge was creating food that both species could eat safely. Bo-ram wiped sweat from her forehead as she checked the protein synthesizers. Velkaran food was simple, high-protein blocks that provided necessary nutrients. No spices, no complex flavors, just fuel for their massive bodies. Human food was the opposite. Complex, varied, full of taste and cultural meaning. "How do you feed a species that doesn't care about flavor?" she muttered, adjusting the temperature on another cooking unit. Her assistant, Junior Chef Park Sung-min, looked up from his prep work. "Maybe that's why they're so aggressive. They've never experienced the joy of good food." Bo-ram smiled at the young man's simple wisdom. "Food is culture, Sung-min. It's how we show love, celebrate victories, comfort sadness. If they don't have that..." She didn't finish the thought. The Velkarans were coming, and she needed everything perfect. On the station's main docking level, the human delegation gathered near Bay 7. Ambassador Ji-woo wore her finest diplomatic uniform, dark blue with gold trim. Captain Daeho stood beside her in his dress whites. Dr. Hae-jin clutched her research tablet, and Chef Bo-ram had changed from her kitchen clothes into a simple but elegant outfit. "Remember the protocol," Ji-woo said quietly. "No sudden movements. Don't show teeth when you smile. They might see it as aggression. Let them approach us first." The airlock hissed open, and the Velkaran delegation emerged. Supreme Hunter Vextar was enormous. Even hunched to fit through the station corridors, he towered over the humans. His gray scales caught the light like armor, and his yellow eyes swept the group with predatory intensity. Each step made the deck plates vibrate under his weight. Behind him came Lieutenant Kethron, slightly smaller but still massive compared to any human. The translator wore a device around his thick neck that would convert Velkaran speech into standard language. though both aliens spoke perfect standard already. Humans. Vextar's voice was like grinding stone. You are smaller than expected. Ambassador Jiwoo stepped forward and bowed slightly, a gesture of respect. Supreme Hunter Vextar, welcome to Kepler 442b Station. I am Ambassador Park Jiwoo, representing the United Human Colonies. Vextar examined her with those yellow eyes. You lead these soft mammals? I speak for them in diplomatic matters. Yes. Interesting. The massive predator moved closer and Jiwoo forced herself not to step back. Your species puzzles us, Ambassador. You have no claws, no fangs, weak bodies, yet you spread across dozens of systems. How do prey animals accomplish this? Captain Daeho cleared his throat. With respect, Supreme Hunter, humans are not prey animals. We're survivors just like your people. Catherine translated rapidly in clicking, growling sounds. Vexitar made a noise that might have been laughter. Everything is prey to something. Stronger, Captain. The question is whether you accept your place in the natural order. Dr. Heijin watched the exchange with fascination. The Velkarans moved with fluid grace despite their size, every gesture controlled and purposeful. They were apex predators designed by evolution to kill efficiently. Perhaps, said Ambassador Jiwoo carefully, we could continue this conversation in more comfortable surroundings. We've prepared accommodations for your delegation, and our chef has worked hard to create meals suitable for both our species. Food, Vextar said. Yes, we require nutrients. Your chef understands Velkaran dietary needs? Chef Bo-Ram stepped forward. I've studied your nutritional requirements extensively, Supreme Hunter. High protein, minimal processing. I can provide what your people need. The massive alien studied her for a long moment. You are very small to be responsible for feeding warriors. Size doesn't determine skill, Bo-Ram replied politely. I've been cooking for 20 years. Cooking? Catherine looked confused. You mean food preparation? More than that, Bo-Ram explained. Cooking is about combining ingredients, creating flavors, making meals that satisfy more than just hunger. The two Velkarans exchanged glances. Vextar spoke in their clicking language, and Kethron responded. Then the Supreme Hunter looked back at the humans. We do not understand this concept. Food provides energy for the body. Nothing more is required. Dr. Haijin made a note on her tablet. The Velkaran's attitude toward food was purely functional. No wonder their meals were so basic. Well, said Ambassador Jiwoo, perhaps this week will be educational for all of us. Shall we proceed to the conference rooms? As they walked through the station corridors, Vextar's presence dominated the space. Other aliens, traders, travelers, station personnel quickly moved out of the way. The Supreme Hunter was used to this reaction. Your delegation is small, he observed. Only 4 individuals? Quality over quantity, Captain Daeho replied. Each member brings specific expertise. In Velkaran culture, larger delegations show strength and importance. Ambassador Jiwoo nodded. Different cultures have different approaches. That's why these talks are so valuable. They reached the diplomatic quarters, where both delegations would stay during negotiations. The rooms were designed to accommodate various alien physiologies with adjustable furniture and environmental controls. We will begin formal talks tomorrow, Jiwoo announced. Tonight, perhaps we could share a meal? It would be an honor to host your delegation for dinner. Vextar looked at Kethron, who shrugged with massive shoulders. Acceptable. We will consume nutrients with you. As the Velkarans settled into their quarters, the human delegation gathered in their own section. Well, said Captain Daeho, they're exactly as intimidating as advertised. But they agreed to negotiate, Jiwoo pointed out. That's something. Most species either run from Velkarans or get conquered by them. Chef Bo-Ram was already planning the evening meal. Did you notice how they talked about food? Just nutrients, just fuel. They don't seem to understand that meals can be more than that. Dr. Heijin looked up from her notes. Their homeworld was incredibly harsh. Maybe they never had time to develop culinary culture. Survival came first always. That's actually sad, Bo-Ram said quietly. Food is one of life's great pleasures. To see it as just fuel. Outside their quarters, the massive space station continued its rotation between the stars. In a few hours, humans and Velkarans would sit together at the same table for the first time in history. Neither species knew that this simple meal would change everything. The first formal negotiation session began at dawn station time. Ambassador Park Ji-woo sat across from Supreme Hunter Vextar in the neutral conference room. The table between them was made of reinforced metal, designed to handle the weight of various alien species. "Let us discuss terms," Vextar said without ceremony, his yellow eyes fixed on Ji-woo with predatory focus. "The Velkaran Empire offers protection to human colonies. In return, you provide tribute and acknowledge our authority." Ji-woo kept her expression neutral. "The united human colonies prefer partnerships based on mutual benefit, not tribute relationships." Kethran translated rapidly for his superior. Though both Velkarans understood standard perfectly, Vextar made a low rumbling sound that might have been amusement. "Partnership implies equality," he said. "Look at yourself, Ambassador. You weigh perhaps 60 kilograms. I weigh 400. Your teeth cannot tear flesh. Your claws cannot rend armor. How are we equal?" Captain Lee Dae-ho shifted in his chair but remained silent. Dr. Yoon Hae-jin took notes on her tablet, recording every word for analysis later. "Physical strength is not the only measure of capability," Ji-woo replied calmly. "Humans have colonized 47 systems in 2 centuries. We've established trade networks, developed new technologies, created stable governments across vast distances. Through hiding and running," Vextar dismissed. "When real predators arrive in your space, what will you do then?" "The same thing we always do," said Captain Dae-ho, unable to stay quiet. "We'll adapt." The massive alien turned his attention to the captain. "Adaptation is for prey species. Predators take what they need through strength." The morning session continued with similar exchanges. The Velkarans spoke in direct, aggressive terms. They saw the universe as a simple place where strong dominated weak. Humans were weak, therefore they needed strong protectors. Ji-woo tried various diplomatic approaches, but every conversation returned to the same point. The Velkarans could not understand how humanity had succeeded without superior physical power. During the lunch break, the human delegation met privately. "They're not budging," reported Captain Dae-ho. "Every argument comes back to physical strength." Dr. Hae-jin scrolled through her research notes. "I've been studying their body language and speech patterns. They genuinely cannot comprehend non-physical forms of power. Their entire worldview is based on predator-prey relationships." "What about their technology?" asked Ji-woo. "They have faster-than-light travel, energy weapons, artificial intelligence. Surely they understand that intelligence matters." "They see technology as tools for hunting," Hae-jin explained. "Better weapons to kill prey, faster ships to catch prey, smarter computers to track prey. Everything serves the same basic function." Chef Kim Bo-ram entered the room carrying a tray of light snacks. "How did the morning go?" "Poorly," Ji-woo admitted. "They want us to accept tributary status. They can't imagine any other relationship between strong and weak species." Bo-ram set down the tray, which held small sandwiches with various fillings. "Speaking of relationships, how was dinner last night?" The previous evening's meal had been educational for everyone. Chef Bo-ram had prepared 2 sets of food, basic protein blocks for the Velkarans and simple human dishes for her own delegation. She had watched the aliens eat with mechanical efficiency, consuming nutrients without any sign of enjoyment or interest. "Fascinating," said Dr. Hae-jin. "They ate exactly the required amount of protein and stopped. No conversation, no social interaction, just fuel consumption." "I offered them some of our food," Bo-ram remembered. "Just plain rice with a tiny bit of salt." Vextar took one bite and said it was unnecessary complexity. "That might be the key," Ji-woo said thoughtfully. "They see complexity as weakness. Simple, direct, efficient. That's their way. But complexity is our strength," Dae-ho pointed out. "Complex societies, complex technologies, complex thinking." Dr. Hae-jin looked up from her tablet. "I've been analyzing their physiology data. Their taste buds are incredibly primitive. They can detect basic nutrients, identify toxins, but they can't actually taste flavor the way we do. What do you mean? Asked Boram. Imagine if you could only see black and white, Heijin explained. That's what food is like for them. They get nutrition information, but none of the sensory pleasure we experience. Boram stared at her. They can't taste food? Not the way we can. Their ancestors needed to identify safe nutrients quickly while hunting. Complex flavor detection wasn't important for survival, so they never evolved it. The implications hit everyone at the same time. A species that couldn't taste food, couldn't appreciate the subtle complexities that made eating pleasurable, might not understand other forms of complexity either. No wonder they're so direct, Ji-woo murmured. If all food tastes the same, if meals are just fuel stops, then eating together isn't social. It's just a biological necessity. And if food isn't cultural, added Boram, then maybe they don't understand how other complex systems work either. The afternoon session proved even more frustrating. Vextar and Kethron presented detailed military assessments of human colonies. They had studied human defenses and found them inadequate against serious threats. Your fleet consists mainly of exploration and transport vessels, Vextar stated. Few warships, limited weapons. When the Korthak swarm expands into your territory, you will be consumed within months. Ji-woo had heard of the Korthak swarm, a species of insectoid aliens that reproduced rapidly and devoured entire worlds. They were expanding slowly but steadily across the galaxy. We have defensive agreements with other species, she said. Other prey species, Kethron corrected. When predators come, prey animals scatter. They will not die to protect you. Captain Daeho leaned forward. And Velkarans would? Velkarans protect what belongs to them, Vextar replied. Accept tributary status, and you become part of the Empire. We defend what is ours, but we would no longer be free to govern ourselves. Freedom is a luxury for those strong enough to maintain it. You are not strong enough. The session ended with no progress. As the delegations separated, Dr. Heijin approached Kethron with her tablet. Lieutenant, may I ask about Velkaran culture? I'm curious about your homeworld. Kethron seemed surprised by the question. What do you wish to know? Art, music, literature. What do Velkarans do for enjoyment? The massive alien looked confused. Enjoyment? Pleasure, recreation, activities that make you happy? Kethron translated the question to Vextar, who responded with clicks and growls. We do not understand this concept. We hunt, we eat, we rest, we reproduce. These serve survival functions. But what about beauty? Things that please the senses? Both Velkarans exchanged glances. Efficient killing is beautiful, Vextar said finally. A perfect hunt pleases our senses. Heijin made notes rapidly. The Velkarans had no concept of art, no recreational activities, no pursuit of beauty for its own sake. Their entire existence revolved around survival and dominance. That evening, the human delegation gathered for dinner in their quarters. Chef Boram had prepared a more elaborate meal, bulgogi with rice, kimchi, and miso soup. The aromas filled the room with complex, inviting scents. I feel sorry for them, Boram said as she served the food. Imagine never tasting anything delicious, never enjoying a meal, never sitting with friends and family over food that brings joy. It explains their worldview, Ji-woo observed. If you can't experience simple pleasures, maybe you can't understand complex emotions either. Or complex societies, added Daeho. If every action must serve immediate survival, then cooperation beyond pack hunting becomes impossible. Dr. Heijin set down her chopsticks. I think I understand now. They're not just physically different from us, they're missing entire dimensions of experience. They literally cannot comprehend why we do things that don't serve immediate survival needs. Like art, music, elaborate cooking, Boram listed. Like diplomacy instead of conquest, added Ji-woo. Like exploration for knowledge instead of resources, finished Daeho. They ate in thoughtful silence for a while, savoring flavors that the Velkarans could never experience. Outside their quarters, the massive predators were consuming their own simple nutrients, unaware of what they were missing. Tomorrow's sessions aren't going to go any better, Jiwoo predicted. They honestly believe that might makes right because that's all they've ever known. Maybe we need to show them something different, Boram suggested. Not argue with them, but demonstrate. Demonstrate what? Asked Daeho. That there are forms of strength they've never imagined. Dr. Heijin looked up from her tablet. The challenge would be finding a way to make them experience something beyond their normal sensory range. Something that would open their minds to new possibilities, Jiwoo agreed. Chef Boram smiled slowly as an idea began forming. What if we could make them taste something, really taste it? The others stared at her. You said they can't taste complex flavors, Daeho pointed out. They can't taste them normally, Boram corrected. But what if we could overwhelm their primitive taste buds, force them to experience sensation they've never felt before? That could be dangerous, Heijin warned. Their nervous systems aren't designed for complex sensory input. Or, said Jiwoo thoughtfully, it could be exactly what we need to break through their limited worldview. Outside, the third day of negotiations started badly and got worse. Supreme Hunter Vexitar grew more impatient with each passing hour. He had expected the humans to accept tributary status after seeing Velkaran strength demonstrations. Instead, they continued to argue for equal partnership. This is waste of time, Vexitar declared during the morning break. His massive form dominated the conference room as he stood. Humans refuse to acknowledge natural order. You are prey species. We are predators. This is simple fact. Ambassador Park Ji-woo remained seated, keeping her voice calm. We've shown you records of human achievements. 47 colonies. Peaceful trade relationships with dozens of species. Technological innovations that benefit everyone. Achievements built on hiding from real threats. Catherine translated his superior's clicking response. When true predators come to your space, your achievements will become dust. Captain Lee Daeho could not stay quiet anymore. You keep calling us prey, but we're sitting here negotiating with you as equals. Prey animals don't do that. Vexitar turned his yellow eyes on the captain. The predator's gaze was like being studied by a hungry shark. You sit here because we allow it. We could take what we want from your colonies without asking. We choose to offer protection instead. Protection we don't need, Daeho replied. Everyone needs protection from something stronger. Dr. Yoon Hae-jin watched the exchange with growing concern. The Velkarans were becoming more aggressive, not less. Their body language showed increasing dominance displays, wider stances, expanded chest positions, direct staring. In Velkaran culture, these were warning signs before violence. Perhaps we should take a longer break, Jiwoo suggested diplomatically. No, Vexitar said firmly. We finish this now. Accept tributary status or we leave. The Velkaran Empire has no time for stubborn prey. The room fell silent. This was the ultimatum everyone had feared. Accept subjugation or lose any chance of alliance with the galaxy's strongest military power. Jiwoo looked at her team. Captain Daeho's jaw was tight with frustration. Dr. Hae-jin clutched her research tablet like a shield. Through the conference room's transparent wall, she could see Chef Kim Boram in the adjacent kitchen, preparing lunch for both delegations. An idea formed in Jiwoo's mind. It was risky, possibly foolish, but they were out of conventional options. Supreme Hunter, she said carefully. You claim that humans are weak because we lack physical strength, but strength comes in many forms. There is only one form of strength that matters, Vexitar replied. The ability to impose your will on others. Then let us prove our strength. Both Velkarans looked interested for the first time in days. Kethron leaned forward. You challenge us to combat? Not combat, Jiwoo said. A different kind of test. If we prove that humans possess strength you don't recognize, will you consider equal partnership? Vexitar made that grinding sound that passed for laughter among his species. What test could soft mammals devise that would impress apex predators? Jiwoo stood and walked to the kitchen door. Chef Kim, could you join us, please? Bo Ram entered the conference room, wiping her hands on a towel. She looked tiny next to the massive Velkarans, but her expression was determined. What strength do you claim? Vexitar asked, examining the small human woman with obvious dismissal. The strength to endure what you cannot, Jiwoo replied. Impossible. Velkaran physiology is superior in every way. Then prove it. Jiwoo gestured to Bo Ram. Our chef will prepare a series of dishes. You must consume each one without showing weakness. If you succeed, we accept tributary status. If you fail, you acknowledge that humans possess capabilities Velkarans lack. The two predators exchanged rapid clicks and growls in their native language. Vextar's yellow eyes narrowed as he studied the humans. You propose food as a test of strength? Endurance, Jiwoo corrected. The ability to withstand sensory experiences your species has never encountered. Food provides nutrients, Kethran said, sounding confused. How can nutrients test strength, Doctor? Heijin spoke up. Because your species has never experienced the full range of sensory input that food can provide. Your taste receptors are primitive compared to ours. Primitive? Vextar's voice carried a dangerous edge. Specialized, Heijin corrected quickly. Designed for efficiency, not complexity. But that means you've never experienced certain types of sensory input. Chef Bo Ram stepped forward. I can create dishes that will challenge your nervous system in ways you've never imagined. If Velkaran physiology is truly superior, you should have no trouble consuming what humans eat regularly. Vextar studied the small woman for a long moment. The concept clearly puzzled him, but his pride was engaged. You believe prey species food can defeat predator metabolism? I believe you'll find our cuisine more challenging than you expect. The YM Supreme Hunter looked at his lieutenant. Kethran shrugged with massive shoulders. If human food is the best challenge they can offer, we accept easily. Very well, Vextar decided. We accept this test. When we succeed, you acknowledge Velkaran superiority and accept tributary status. Agreed, said Jiwoo. And when you discover that human capabilities exceed your understanding, you'll consider equal partnership. That will not happen, Vextar stated with absolute confidence. Boram bowed politely to both predators. I'll need 2 hours to prepare. The test will begin at the evening meal. As the delegation separated, the humans gathered in their private quarters. Are we insane? Captain Deho asked. We're betting humanity's independence on spicy food? Not just spicy, Boram corrected. Complex. Their taste buds can't process the layered flavors and sensations that we take for granted. It would be like suddenly seeing color for the first time. Dr. Heijin pulled up biological charts on her tablet. Their nervous systems are designed for simple input-output responses. Complex sensory data could overwhelm them completely. Could it hurt them? Jiwoo asked. Physically? Probably not. Their metabolism is incredibly robust. But psychologically? We're talking about sensory experiences they have no framework to understand. Good, said Captain Deho grimly. It's time they learned what they don't know. In the kitchen, Boram began her preparations. She started with simple ingredients, rice, vegetables, basic proteins. But she also gathered spices and seasonings from across human space. Gochugaru from Korea, ghost peppers from Earth's India region, fermented pastes that had been aging for decades. What's the plan? Asked her assistant, Junior Chef Park Sung-min. We start gentle, Boram explained, checking her spice collection. Let them think they're winning. Plain rice, simple seasonings. Then we escalate gradually until we reach something that will change their understanding forever. What if they can handle everything? Boram smiled as she picked up a jar of her grandmother's ghost pepper paste, aged for 30 years and hot enough to make experienced human chefs weep. Trust me, they can't handle everything. News of the challenge spread quickly through the station. Other alien species gathered to watch the unprecedented contest. Never before had anyone challenged the Velkarans to anything other than combat. That evening, the main dining hall was packed with observers. The human and Velkaran delegations sat at a central table, while dozens of other species watched from surrounding tables. Supreme Hunter Vextar looked completely relaxed, confident in his species superiority. Kethron appeared slightly nervous but tried to hide it. Neither predator understood what they were about to experience. Chef Boram entered carrying the first dish, simple white rice with the mildest Korean seasonings. "We begin with traditional, human food," she announced to the room. "Plain rice with basic flavoring." She placed small bowls before each Velkarin. The rice looked harmless, almost boring. Vextar examined the contents of his bowl. "This is your challenge? Processed plant matter?" "This is the beginning," Boram replied. "Eat as much as you like." Both Velkarans consumed the rice quickly and efficiently. Their expressions showed no reaction at all. To their primitive taste buds, it registered as slightly salted nutrients. Nothing more. "Too easy," Vextar declared. "Bring the next test." Boram returned with the second dish, kimchi jjigae with very mild spice levels. The fermented vegetables and subtle heat were still within the range of what Velkaran palates might detect. Again, both predators ate without difficulty, though Kethrin showed a slight reaction to the new flavors. His tongue flicked out once, testing the air. "Interesting texture," he admitted, "but still just nutrients." The third dish was bulgogi with ginger and garlic. The meat was familiar to their carnivorous systems, but the marinades and seasonings were more complex than anything they had ever tasted. Vextar ate steadily, but his yellow eyes widened slightly. For the first time, he was experiencing something beyond basic nutrition. The combination of sweet, savory, and aromatic compounds was registering on sensory receptors that had never been properly stimulated. "Strange," he muttered. "This meat has unusual properties." "How so?" asked Dr. He-jin from the human table. "It provides more than proteins. There are other sensations." Kethrin had stopped eating entirely. His massive head was tilted as if he was trying to understand something completely new. "My mouth feels different," he said quietly. The watching aliens leaned forward with interest. Something was happening to the supposedly invincible Velkarans. Boram smiled as she prepared the fourth dish. Chef Kim Boram stood in the kitchen, staring at the final dish she had prepared. The andong jimdak sat in its serving bowl, dark sauce gleaming under the lights. She had used her grandmother's recipe exactly, but added ghost peppers and extra gochugaru. The aroma was so intense that even she had to step back. "Are you sure about this?" asked Junior Chef Park Sung-min, his eyes watering from just being near the dish. "No," Boram admitted. "But they asked for a test of endurance. This will definitely test them." She picked up the serving bowl and walked back to the dining hall. The room had grown quieter as word spread about what was happening. Alien species from across the galaxy watched as the mighty Velkarans struggled with human cuisine. Supreme Hunter Vextar was trying to maintain his composure, but sweat now covered his gray scales. His yellow eyes were slightly unfocused, and his breathing was deeper than normal. Beside him, Lieutenant Kethron looked even worse. The smaller Velkarn was gripping the table edge with his claws, leaving small gouges in the metal. "The final dish," Boram announced to the room. She set the bowl before Vextar with steady hands. The aroma hit the Supreme Hunter immediately. His nostrils flared, and his head jerked back as if he had been struck. Around the room, other aliens moved away from their tables. The scent of ghost, peppers, and aged fermented paste was overwhelming even to species with normal taste buds. "What is this substance?" Vextar demanded, but his voice was rougher than before. "Andong jimdak," Boram replied. "Braised chicken with vegetables and spicy sauce, a traditional dish from my grandmother's recipe." Dr. Yoon Hai-jin watched from the human table, her medical scanners discreetly monitoring Velkaran vital signs. Both predators showed elevated heart rates, increased body temperature, and neural activity unlike anything in her database. "This cannot be food," Kethrin said, staring at the dish with something approaching fear. "It attacks the senses before consumption." "It's just chicken and vegetables," said Captain Lee Daeho. "My daughter eats this for dinner twice a week." Ambassador Park Ji-woo remained silent, but her hands were clenched under the table. Everything depended on what happened next. Vextar looked around the room. Dozens of alien eyes watched him, Other species that had bowed to Velkaran might for centuries were seeing their greatest predators struggle with prey species food. His pride would not allow retreat. "I am supreme hunter of the Velkaran Empire," he declared. "No prey species food can defeat me." He picked up a piece of chicken with his claws and put it in his mouth. For exactly 3 seconds, nothing happened. Vextar chewed normally, his expression neutral. Boram held her breath. Then the ghost peppers hit his nervous system. The sensation was unlike anything Vextar had ever experienced. It wasn't just heat. It was an explosion of sensory input that his primitive taste buds had never been designed to handle. The capsaicin flooded receptors that had only ever detected basic nutrients. His brain, evolved for simple predator responses, suddenly received data it had no framework to process. But there was more than just heat. The fermented doenjang added layers of complex umami flavors. The gochugaru brought sweet heat and smoky depth. Garlic and ginger created aromatic compounds that filled his sinuses with sensations his species had never evolved to understand. It was like suddenly seeing color for the first time, hearing music after a lifetime of silence, or feeling silk after knowing only rough stone. Every sensory receptor in his mouth and throat fired at once, sending his nervous system into complete overload. Vextar's eyes went wide, then wider. His massive body went rigid as his brain tried to process the unprecedented flood of sensation. For the first time in his life, the apex predator was experiencing true taste. The heat built and built, far beyond anything his physiology could handle. But it wasn't the physical burning that broke him. It was the realization of what he had been missing his entire life. Every meal of his existence had been empty fuel consumption. Every feeding had been mechanical, joyless, devoid of pleasure or meaning. He had lived in a world of sensory poverty, never knowing that food could be beautiful, complex, emotionally meaningful. Tears began to form in his yellow eyes. At first, they were just a physical response to the capsaicin. His tear ducts activated automatically to flush the burning compounds. But as the full impact of the experience hit him, the tears became something else entirely. They were tears of loss, mourning for all the meals he had never truly tasted, tears of wonder at discovering sensations beyond his imagination, tears of shame that his species had lived so long without knowing what they were missing. The tears flowed freely down his scaled cheeks as the supreme hunter of the Velkaran Empire wept openly in front of representatives from dozens of alien species. The dining hall fell completely silent. No one had ever seen a Velkaran cry. Most species didn't even know they could cry. Ketharin stared at his superior in shock. "Supreme Hunter, what is happening?" Vextar couldn't answer. He was still processing the flood of sensation, still reeling from the discovery that an entire dimension of experience had been hidden from him his whole life. The spice continued to burn, but that was nothing compared to the emotional impact of true taste. Boram watched with a mixture of triumph and sympathy. She had wanted to challenge the Velkarans, but seeing the mighty predator reduced to tears made her feel something she hadn't expected. Pity. "Water," she said quietly to her assistant. "Bring milk if you have it." But Vextar didn't seem to notice the burning anymore. He was staring at the remaining food in his bowl with an expression of wonder and terror. "I can taste it," he whispered. "I can actually taste it." Dr. Hajian's scanner showed incredible neural activity in both Velkarans. Their brains were working harder than she had ever seen, processing sensory data that their species had never been designed to handle. "Supreme Hunter," Jiwoo said gently. "Are you all right?" Vextar looked at her, his yellow eyes bright with tears and confusion. "How long have your people known about this?" "Known about what?" "This." He gestured at the food, searching for words his language didn't contain. "This richness, this complexity, this pleasure in simple nutrients." "Always," Jiwoo replied. "Food has been part of human culture for our entire history. And you eat like this regularly?" "Every day," said Captain Deho. 3 times a day, usually. The full implications hit Vextar like a physical blow. Humans experienced this level of sensory richness at every meal. They turned necessary nutrition into pleasure, into art, into social bonding. Every day of their lives was filled with experiences his species couldn't even imagine. "We have been fools," he said quietly. The watching aliens stirred with interest. This was not how anyone had expected the challenge to end. Kethran, meanwhile, had tried a small bite of his own portion. The lieutenant's reaction was even more dramatic than his superiors. He made a sound like a roar of pain and surprise, then sat motionless as tears streamed down his face. "It hurts," he gasped, "but it also feels wonderful," Vextar finished. "Like discovering we have been blind our entire lives." Boram approached the table cautiously. "Supreme Hunter, I can bring something to help with the burning." Vextar looked at her with new respect. This small human female had just shattered his understanding of the universe. "You knew this would happen. I hoped it would open your minds to new possibilities." "It has done more than that." He wiped tears from his scaled cheeks with the back of his massive hand. "It has shown us that we know nothing about strength." The room was completely silent now. Representatives from dozens of species watched history being made. "A species that can create such complexity from simple ingredients," Vextar continued, his voice growing stronger. "A species that finds joy in necessity that turns survival into pleasure. Such a species possesses power we never imagined." Ambassador Jiwoo felt her heart racing. "Does this mean you acknowledge that humans have capabilities Velkarans lack?" "More than that," Vextar replied. "It means we acknowledge that we have been looking at strength in entirely the wrong way." He stood slowly, his massive frame towering over the humans even while tears still flowed. "The challenge is complete. Humans have proven their strength." "But you finished the dish," Captain Daeho pointed out. "You endured the test." "No," Vextar said firmly. "We survived it. But survival is not the same as mastery. You created this experience, we could only endure it. The strength belongs to those who build, not those who merely withstand." The dining hall erupted in murmurs as aliens began to understand what they had witnessed. The galaxy's most feared predators had just admitted that prey species food had defeated them. But Vextar wasn't finished. "Tomorrow we will discuss new terms, equal partnership between species who possess different forms of strength." As he walked toward the exit, still wiping tears from his eyes, he paused beside Boram. "Small human chef," he said quietly, "will you teach me more about this thing you call flavor?" Boram smiled up at the massive predator. "It would be my honor, Supreme Hunter." The room watched as the delegation that had arrived to subjugate humanity instead walked away humbled by the simple power of well-seasoned food. The next morning brought changes that no one had expected. Supreme Hunter Vextar arrived at the conference room early, before the human delegation. He sat quietly at the large table, staring at his clawed hands with an expression of deep thought. When Ambassador Park Ji-woo entered with her team, she found the massive predator looking somehow smaller than before. The arrogant confidence that had defined him for 3 days was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like humility. "Good morning, Supreme Hunter," Ji-woo said carefully. "How are you feeling?" Vextar looked up at her with those yellow eyes, now clear of tears but still showing traces of wonder. "Different," he said simply. "Everything feels different." Lieutenant Kethran arrived moments later, moving more slowly than usual. The smaller Velkaran's scales seemed dulled, and his posture suggested exhaustion. "Did you sleep well?" asked Dr. Yoon Haijin, genuinely concerned about their physical condition. "Sleep was difficult," Kethran admitted. "My mind keeps returning to the experience. I cannot stop thinking about the flavors." Captain Lee Dae-ho exchanged glances with his colleagues. Neither Velkaran looked like the intimidating predators who had demanded tribute just yesterday. "Supreme Hunter," Ji-woo began, diplomatically, "yesterday you mentioned discussing new terms for our relationship." "Yes," Vextar said, but his voice lacked its former authority. "But first I must understand something. That food your chef prepared, Do all humans experience such intensity? Not everyone enjoys spicy food, Jiwoo replied. But yes, most humans can taste complex flavors in every meal. Every meal, Vextar repeated slowly. Every single feeding you experience sensations that overwhelmed our nervous systems. Dr. He-jin pulled up data on her tablet. Your species evolved different priorities. Enhanced strength, speed, reflexes, all focused on hunting and survival. Our ancestors needed to identify safe plants, detect spoilage, distinguish between hundreds of different food sources. So we developed complex sensory systems. And you use these abilities for pleasure, Catherine said. It wasn't a question. Among other things, yes, food is culture for us. We cook together, eat together, celebrate with special meals. It's how we bond with family and friends. Both Velkarans were silent for a long moment. Finally, Vextar spoke. We came here believing that strength was simple, physical power, military, might, the ability to dominate others. But you showed us strength we never knew existed. What kind of strength? Asked Captain Daeho. The strength to find joy in necessity. The strength to create beauty from basic survival needs. The strength to share pleasure with others instead of hoarding resources. Jiwoo felt a flutter of hope. And what does this mean for our negotiations? Vexitar was quiet for another long moment, clearly struggling with concepts his species had never considered. It means we were wrong, he said finally. About everything. The words hung in the air like a confession. Catherine looked shocked that his superior had admitted error. So directly, we judged your species by our standards, Vextar continued. Physical weakness, small size, fragile bodies. We saw only what you lacked compared to us. We never looked for what you possessed that we do not. And what is that? Jiwoo asked gently. Wisdom. The wisdom to know that survival alone is not enough. That existence can be more than just hunting and eating and reproduction. Dr. He-jin leaned forward. Supreme Hunter, your species has achieved remarkable things. Faster than light travel, energy weapons, a stable empire spanning multiple star systems. You obviously understand more than just hunting. We understand tools, Vextar corrected. Better ways to hunt, faster ways to move, stronger ways to fight, but we never learned to live. What do you mean? Catherine answered instead of his superior. Last night I tried to remember a single moment of pure pleasure in my entire life. Something that brought joy without serving survival needs. I could not find one. The human delegation exchanged concerned glances. A species that had never experienced joy was something they hadn't considered. That's not your fault, Jiwoo said kindly. Your evolutionary history was different from ours. You developed what you needed to survive on your world. But it means we are incomplete, Vexitar said. We built an empire, but we never learned what empires should protect. We conquered worlds, but we never understood why life was worth living. Chef Kim Bo-ram spoke for the first time since entering the room. Supreme Hunter, would you like to learn? Both Velkarans looked at her with surprise. Learn what? How to taste, how to enjoy food, how to find pleasure in simple things. Vextar stared at the small human woman. You would teach apex predators after we demanded your submission? Everyone deserves to experience joy, Bo-ram replied. And honestly, I'm curious to see how your physiology adapts. Yesterday proved that your taste buds can handle more than you thought. It was painful, Catherine said. Growth often is, Bo-ram agreed. But it's also rewarding. Ambassador Jiwoo saw an opportunity. Perhaps we could structure our alliance around this concept. Cultural exchange alongside military cooperation. Cultural exchange? Vexitar looked confused. You protect human colonies from external threats. We share our cultural knowledge, cooking, art, music, literature. Things that make life worth protecting. Captain Daeho added, your military strength combined with human cultural development. Both species become more complete. But we have nothing cultural to offer, Catherine protested. We have no art, no music, no traditions beyond hunting techniques. You have discipline, Dr. He-jin pointed out. Focus, determination, loyalty to your people. You've built stable societies across multiple worlds. That's valuable knowledge too. And you have perspective we lack, added Jiwoo. The ability to see threats clearly, to make hard decisions quickly. These are strengths humans sometimes struggle with. For the first time since entering the room, Vextar showed interest. You would value our military judgment? Absolutely. Equal partnership means both sides contribute what they do best. The Supreme Hunter was quiet for several minutes, clearly, thinking hard about concepts his species had never considered. This would be unprecedented, he said finally. The Velkaran Empire has never formed equal alliances. We conquer or we ignore. Maybe it's time to try something new, suggested Captain Daeho. Something that serves more than just survival needs, added Boram. Vextar looked at each human in turn, then at his own lieutenant. Kethran gave a small nod of encouragement. Very well, the Supreme Hunter decided. We propose a new type of alliance. Military protection in exchange for cultural education. Equal partnership between species with different strengths. Ambassador Jiwoo felt relief flood through her. The United Human Colonies would be honored to form such an alliance. But, Vextar continued, raising one clawed hand, we have conditions. What conditions? First, Chef Kim Boram must become our cultural advisor. We need someone who understands both species to guide this exchange. Boram looked surprised. I'm just a cook. You are the human who opened our minds to new possibilities, Vextar corrected. Without you, we would still be blind to our own limitations. What's the second condition? Asked Jiwoo. We begin immediately. I want to understand this thing you call flavor. I want to learn what we have been missing. Dr. Heijin smiled. That might take some time. Your taste buds will need to adapt gradually. We have patience, Kethran said. For the first time in our lives, we have something worth waiting for. The morning negotiation session that had started with uncertainty ended with hope. As the delegations prepared to draft formal alliance documents, Vextar approached Chef Boram privately. Small, human, he said quietly. The experience yesterday was overwhelming, but it was also the most significant moment of my life. How so? For 43 years I believed I was complete. I was the strongest hunter, the fiercest warrior, the most successful predator in Velkaran history. But yesterday, I discovered that I had lived my entire existence in darkness. Boram looked up at the massive alien with compassion. It's not darkness if you don't know light exists. But now I do know, and I cannot return to ignorance. His yellow eyes showed a determination that was different from his earlier aggression. This was the determination to learn, not to conquer. Then we'll learn together, Boram promised. I'll teach you about human cuisine, and maybe you can teach me about Velkaran culture. There must be beauty in your traditions too, even if it's different from ours. I hope you are right, Vextar said. I hope we have something worthy to share. As the day continued, word of the unprecedented alliance spread throughout the station. Other alien species watched with fascination as the galaxy's most feared predators began their first lessons in cultural appreciation. But this was only the beginning. The real test would come when both species tried to build something entirely new together, a partnership based not on domination, but on mutual growth and understanding. In the kitchen that evening, Boram prepared her second meal for the Velkarans. This time, she started with the mildest flavors possible, designed to gently introduce their awakening taste buds to new sensations without overwhelming them. It was a small step, but it represented something revolutionary. The first time in galactic history that apex predators had chosen to learn from their prey, instead of simply devouring them. 6 months later, the changes were visible throughout the galaxy. Ambassador Park Jiwoo stood on the observation deck of Kepler 442b station, watching ships arrive from across known space. The monthly cultural exchange meetings had grown from a simple human Velkaran alliance into something much larger. Representatives from dozens of species came to witness what many called the flavor revolution. Ambassador, came a familiar grinding voice behind her. The afternoon session is ready. To begin, Jiwoo turned to see Supreme Hunter Vextar approaching. The massive Velcaran looked different now, not physically, but in the way he carried himself. The predatory aggression had been replaced by something that looked almost like contentment. "How are the new students doing?" Jiwoo asked as they walked toward the conference rooms. "Better than expected," Vextar replied. The hegemony delegation actually requested extra spice in yesterday's meal. The Crystalline Collective wants to learn human music theory. Even the Void Walkers are interested in what they call sensory expansion. It had started with the Velcaran Empire, but word of the alliance had spread quickly. Other species wanted to understand why the galaxy's most feared predators were learning to cook. More importantly, they wanted to know what humans possessed that could change apex predators so completely. In Conference Room Alpha, Chef Kim Bo-ram was teaching a mixed class of aliens how to prepare kimchi. Her students included 3 Velcarans, 2 insectoid Korthak, 1 energy-based Void Walker wearing a containment suit, and a delegation from the plant-based Verdant Alliance. "The fermentation process is crucial," Bo-ram explained, demonstrating proper cabbage preparation. "Time and patience create complexity that cannot be rushed." Lieutenant Kethron raised one clawed hand. Over the months, he had become Bo-ram's most eager student. "Chef Kim, how do we know when the fermentation is complete?" "You taste it," Bo-ram replied with a smile. "Your palate will tell you when the flavors have developed properly." 6 months ago, the idea of Velcarans relying on taste for anything would have been impossible. Now Kethron nodded seriously, making notes on his tablet about flavor development. The Korthak representative, an insectoid creature named Click79, buzzed with interest. "Our species processes nutrients through chemical analysis. But this fermentation creates compounds our sensors cannot predict. How do organic taste systems detect such complexity?" Dr. Yoon Hae-jin, who had become the station's resident expert on interspecies sensory adaptation, answered from the back of the room. Organic taste systems evolved to detect thousands of chemical combinations. They're not just analytical tools, they're experiential interfaces. "Meaning?" asked the Void Walker, its translated voice carrying curiosity. "Meaning taste doesn't just identify chemicals, it creates emotional responses to them. Pleasure, comfort, excitement, even memory associations." The Verdant Alliance delegate rustled its leaves thoughtfully. "Our species absorbs nutrients directly from soil and sunlight, but we have observed that species with taste systems show greater cultural development. Perhaps sensory pleasure drives creative growth." Bo-ram set down her preparation knife. "Food is just the beginning. Once you understand that survival needs can become sources of joy, you start seeing possibilities everywhere." In another conference room, Captain Lee Dae-ho was leading a discussion on defensive strategies with Velcaran military advisors. The partnership had proven incredibly effective. Human creativity combined with Velcaran tactical expertise had already prevented 3 potential conflicts in the outer colonies. "The hegemony fleet is repositioning near the Centauri trade routes," reported Commander Thekvar, one of Vextar's senior officers. "Their pattern suggests preparation for territory expansion. But they've agreed to attend next month's cultural exchange," Dae-ho pointed out. "Would they risk military action while pursuing diplomatic contact?" "Traditional Velcaran analysis would assume deception," Thekvar admitted. "But human diplomatic models suggest they may be genuinely interested in alliance benefits. The integration of human and Velcaran strategic thinking had created entirely new approaches to interstellar relations. Instead of assuming hostility or submission, the alliance looked for ways to offer mutual benefits. "What if we invited the hegemony to participate in the cooking workshops?" suggested Lieutenant Commander Park So-young, Dae-ho's tactical officer. "Species that learn to appreciate complex flavors seem less interested in simple conquest." Thekvar's scaled features showed what might have been amusement. 6 months ago, I would have called that ridiculous. Now I think it might be the most effective military strategy we have ever developed. Back in the main dining hall, the evening meal brought together representatives from across the galaxy. The scene would have been unthinkable a year earlier. Dozens of species sharing food, conversation, and genuine friendship. Supreme Hunter Vextar sat at the central table with the original human delegation. His plate contained a carefully prepared mix of foods designed to continue expanding his taste experience without overwhelming his still-developing palate. "Ambassador," he said to Jiwoo, "I have received communication from the Velkaran Council. They wish to expand the alliance to include cultural exchange programs on our homeworlds." "That's wonderful news," Jiwoo replied. "Are you ready for humans to visit Velkaran space?" "More than ready. Our people are eager to learn what we have learned. But I must warn you, Velkaran homeworlds are harsh by human standards, and human worlds are soft by Velkaran standards," Jiwoo pointed out. "That's what makes the exchange valuable." Chef Boram joined their table, looking tired but satisfied after her day of teaching. "Supreme Hunter, how was today's lesson?" "Enlightening," Vextar replied, taking a careful bite of his seasoned meat. "I am beginning to understand the difference between eating and dining." "What difference is that?" "Eating is fuel consumption. Dining is cultural participation. When we share food, we share more than nutrients. We share experience." Kathran approached the table carrying his own plate. "Chef Kim, the Crystalline Collective wants to know if flavor concepts can be applied to energy consumption. They absorb pure electromagnetic radiation, but they wonder if different frequency combinations might create experiential variations." Boram looked thoughtful. "That's actually fascinating. Energy frequencies as flavor profiles. We might be able to help them discover taste sensations in their own feeding methods." Dr. Heijin looked up from her ever-present tablet. "The biological implications are incredible. We're not just teaching other species about human culture, we're helping them discover sensory capabilities they never knew they had, which leads to cultural development they never thought possible," added Captain Deho. As the evening continued, species after species approached the human table to share discoveries from their cultural exchange experiences. The Void Walkers had learned to modulate their energy patterns to create what they called harmonic nutrition. The hegemony had developed new forms of group bonding based on shared meal preparation. Even the traditionally solitary rock miners had started gathering for communal food experiences. "You know what the most interesting part is?" Jiwoo mused, as she watched the diverse gathering. "We never set out to change galactic civilization. We just wanted to avoid becoming a tributary species." "But maybe that's why it worked," Vextar suggested. "You were not trying to conquer or convert. You were trying to share something you valued. And now look," Boram gestured around the room. "Species that have been enemies for centuries are learning to cook together." "Food really is a universal language," agreed Dr. Heijin. "More than language," Vextar corrected. "Food is universal hope. Hope that existence can be more than mere survival. Hope that different species can find common ground. Hope that strength and gentleness can coexist." As the meal wound down, representatives began departing for their various ships and quarters. But the conversations continued. Plans were made for future exchanges, and friendships deepened across species lines that had never been crossed before. Later that night, Vextar found himself alone in the observation lounge, staring out at the stars. Jiwoo discovered him there, standing quietly in the darkness. "Supreme Hunter, is everything all right?" "I was thinking," he replied without turning. 6 months ago, I looked at those stars and saw territories to conquer, resources to claim, threats to eliminate. Now I see possibilities. Worlds where different species might learn from each other. Systems where strength serves beauty instead of just domination. A galaxy where being different is valued instead of feared." Jiwoo joined him at the viewport. "And it all started with spicy food." Vextar made that grinding sound that had become recognizable as laughter. "It started with one small human chef who refused to let apex predators remain ignorant of joy. She changed everything, didn't she? She showed us what we were missing. But more than that, she showed us that we could learn to experience what we had missed. That it was not too late to discover new forms of strength." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching ships arrive and depart from the station. Each vessel carried representatives returning to their homeworlds with new ideas about cooperation, culture, and the possibility that the galaxy could be more than an endless cycle of conquest and submission.